All right, so today we are in the week of October 12th through the 15th. So we're covering endocrine system. End of the week, you've got your exam 3 over chapter 7 and 8. So just to reiterate, endocrine system is not on this exam. Okay, so just want to make sure you know exactly what to study. You study nervous system and special senses for the exam. All right. So we're probably going to finish endocrine system today, and we'll probably start blood because we've got to cover blood and cardiovascular system next week. Okay, next week you'll have a mastering quiz over chapter 10, and you'll have quiz 4 over chapter 9. Okay. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we've covered several endocrine organs in the previous video. So if you need a review, make sure you go back through that. So we'll start today with the pancreas. The pancreas has 2 types of tissue in it. Some of it is exocrine and secretes digestive juices, helps you break down food. It also has endocrine tissue, known as the pancreatic islet cells or islets of Langerhans. Okay, Langerhans, was a person who was instrumental in studying this, so he got his name in it. But we're starting to sort of refer to things without names anymore. All right, so you can say either pancreatic islets or islets of Langerhans. Okay, so the endocrine tissue produces 2 important hormones, all right, because that's what endocrine glands do. They make and secrete hormones. So the insulin, you have insulin and glucagon. So insulin is secreted when your blood glucose level or your blood sugar level is too high. Okay. And what does it do when it gets secreted? Well, insulin's then going to stimulate uptake of glucose. So getting glucose out of the bloodstream by cells in your body. So glucagon, on the other hand, gets secreted when your blood sugar levels get too low. And specifically, glucagon is going to target your liver as well as your adipose tissue, your fat cells. And it's going to stimulate that liver to break down the glycogen and make glucose. I don't know if you remember this back from our chemistry chapter on when we studied carbohydrates. Glycogen is basically a savings account. So glycogen is taking up a bunch of glucose molecules and linking them together, okay? So that's how your body stores glucose in the form of glycogen, which is just a branch chain of glucose. And so glucagon stimulates breaking down of that glycogen so that you can access the glucose when your blood sugar is too low. All right, so what does that look like? If you think about it as a picture. So again, we're trying to maintain homeostasis, equilibrium, right? So if your blood glucose gets too high, once you eat, your pancreas is going to secrete insulin into your bloodstream. Okay, the insulin goes to your liver, prompts your liver to start storing glucose and converting it to glycogen. Okay. Insulin also goes to your muscle cells, and they also start storing glycogen. Okay, and they also use some of that glucose to build protein. And some of that insulin goes to your adipose tissue, which is then going to use that glucose from the blood to form more fat. Okay, so it's one reason why eating too much sugar is not good for you. Among other reasons, it can basically tell your body to start storing it as fat. Okay. All right, and doing all these things is going to cause your glucose or sugar level to drop. So let's just say another scenario where your blood sugar gets too low. Maybe you haven't eaten in a long time, or there's something else going on. So in between meals, your pancreas is going to start secreting glucagon into the blood. Some of that's going to go to your adipose tissue, so you start breaking down some of that fat in your adipose tissue. Okay, so you can use it to make glucose. Now, you're also going to send some of that glucagon to the liver, and it will break down some of the glycogen stored in the liver. And it breaks it down so you can access the glucose. And your glucose goes into the bloodstream, raises up your blood glucose level or blood sugar level in your blood. So both of these mechanisms work together to maintain homeostasis. All right. So that's essentially how the body works normally. What about situations where there are challenges? Well, one of those is diabetes mellitus. And here you have cells in your body that are sensitive to insulin. And those cells are not able to take up glucose. They're not able to metabolize it, right? Make ATP. So that means your blood glucose level is going to get really high because you can't take it up out of your blood, right? And we call that hyperglycemia. And that should make sense because hyper means what? High or more, right? Glyce means what? Glucose or sugar, right? So what are some of the symptoms of diabetes mellitus? So you're going to see extreme hunger, also known as polyphagia. Okay, that name should make sense because remember phage, like in the phagocytes, means eating. Poly is many, so you're eating a lot. Glucose in the urine, also known as glycosuria. That should also make sense. Glycose, sugar, urea, has to do with urine. Excessive water loss through your urine. Okay, that's polyuria. Okay, poly, many, lots of water lost through the urine. And polydipsia, which means extreme thirst. Okay. So there's two types of diabetes mellitus. You have type 1 and type 2. Type 1 means you're dependent on insulin because your pancreas is not producing it. Okay, and you have immune cells in your body that actually destroy the pancreatic islet cells that make it. Okay. And type 2, it's non-insulin dependent. So here you get sometimes normal levels of insulin or elevated levels. Okay, the problem here is that the receptors on cells aren't responding to that insulin. So it's not that you don't have it, it's that your cells can't respond to it. Okay, so those are two different situations. Both can cause a form of diabetes. Okay. All right, so let's pause there. Let's talk about the pancreas. Let's talk about pathways with insulin and glucagon. Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. You can do that at your table. And you can do that at home as well. Okay, next question. Explain the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So there's other endocrine glands other than the ones that we've covered already. We also want to talk about the testes and the ovaries. So we may assume that those are just part of the reproductive system, but as we'll find out, they are also part of the endocrine system. So the testes produce androgens, which are a class of hormones like testosterone. The ovaries produce estrogens and progesterone. So secretion of these hormones is going to be controlled by our old friends, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Okay, everybody remember those two friends? Okay, so nod your head, yes, we remember the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Okay, very good. So let's talk about androgens. Okay, so during puberty, you get higher testosterone secretion. Okay, So makes the male reproductive organs grow, right? So, and this again doesn't happen generally until puberty, okay? Also, you get more male secondary sex characteristics. So guys start actually growing facial hair, underarm hair, pubic hair. So, because remember, axillary is under your arm or your armpit. So you start getting larger larynx and vocal cords. Okay, part of responsible for men getting deeper voices during that period of time. All right, getting stronger, muscular strength, and stimulating oil and sweat glands in your skin. Okay, so people may associate that with like pimples and all of that good stuff, acne. All right, people start getting that when they go into puberty. Okay, what about estrogen and progesterone? So these are required for breasts to develop. They also regulate the uterine cycle. Okay, so ovulation, right? So estrogens specifically make the uterus, vagina grow during puberty, right? So estrogens are also critical to make sure eggs form, okay? And they're also responsible for secondary sex characteristics in females. So like female body hair, distribution of fat, okay, also are basically under control of the estrogens, okay? All right, so what about other endocrine glands? So we also have the thymus. Typically, it's going to be more active when you're a kid. And it causes lymphocytes to become T lymphocytes, okay? Thymus-derived lymphocytes. So they get more differentiated. So you may have heard of B cells and T cells, okay? That's where the T cells come from. So epithelial cells are going to secrete hormones called thymosins, okay, related to the coming out of the thymus gland. The pineal gland, you remember it's located in the brain, a little posterior to the hypothalamus. It's responsible for making melatonin, okay? And if you're not familiar with it, you are very thankful that you have it, right? Melatonin is involved in your sleep cycle, okay? Your pattern of being awake and to sleep. So if you get to sleep easily, you can thank your melatonin. If you have trouble getting to sleep, you probably wish you had more melatonin, okay? So very important. Okay, here's an image, just kind of shows you patterns, and those patterns can change during times of the year, okay? So, and that should make sense because, it's different times of the year, you've got different times when there's sunlight, right? So you have some adjustment in those rhythms. All right, so other tissues can also produce hormones. So leptin is a hormone produced by adipose tissue. Okay. And it signals satiety, or basically saying that you are satiated, which means you're full. So your hypothalamus is going to signal to your hypothalamus that you're full. Okay. And that's just basically you've had a meal. Your body has to have some sort of way to tell your body that you're full. If you don't, you're going to keep eating. Okay. So you have to sort of train your body to be able to sort of know when you're full sometimes if you're having trouble with that. All right. We also have other growth factors. And by growth, what we're really talking about is stimulating cell division or mitosis. You have the granulocyte and macrophage colony stimulating factor. So remember, macrophages are phagocytes. Platelet-derived growth factor. Okay, so it's the growth factor involved in the cardiovascular system, which we'll talk about next. Epidermal growth factor, okay, involved in growing your epithelial cells in your epidermis. Nerve growth factor, obviously helping you develop nerves. Tumor angiogenesis factor, okay? So an angio has to do with blood vessels, genesis has to do with creation. So in this case, this is a factor that your tumor cells use to develop their own blood supply, okay? So that's how they're able to grow and expand. And there's a whole field of research as to how to stop that process from happening, because the thought is if you can keep them from developing their blood supply, you can stop them faster. Okay. Also, you have the prostaglandins. These are basically very specific, act in very local locations. They're not widespread. They just function in certain spots in the body, but they're considered very potent in the sense that you don't need a lot of them to have a big effect. They help with contractions in the uterus. Okay. Also with gastric secretions, they reduce those in the stomach, lower your blood pressure. Okay. Also, they prevent platelets from aggregating. Okay. So you need that when you're making a blood clot, but you don't need that any other time, right? Okay. So let's think about this in terms of levels of organization, right? So remember, we start with the organism, and you go down the organ systems, to your organs, right? Your tissues, cells, your organelles, your atoms and molecules. So if we think about this on more of a cellular or organ level, organs can communicate with each other, cells can communicate with each other through chemical signals. So you can also have chemical signals between different people, okay? And they're called pheromones, okay? So and humans actually do produce chemicals that get airborne from a variety of different areas, okay? That you can sense things about people based on smelling those pheromones. All right. So effects of aging. So how does aging involve the endocrine system? Well, as you get older, you can have issues with the thyroid, could be hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism. Okay, so each of these can have some effect. Diabetes, again, like we said, type 1, you tend to see this more in children, or at least starting in children. Type 2, you tend to see starting more in adulthood. You see some type 2 in kids just based on diet and lack of exercise. But you generally see that diabetes type 2 as people get a little older. Also, as you get really older, and if you're sedentary, that can also make someone pre-diabetic or potentially develop into diabetes. All right, a good friend, homeostasis. So what does the endocrine system have to do with homeostasis? Well, it works with your nervous system to help you maintain it. So specifically, how does your endocrine system do that? The endocrine system, again, is involved in digestion, right, with insulin and glucagon, right? Helps fuel metabolism, okay? So you have hormones that are helpful, like your thyroid gland hormones that help you with metabolism. So help you maintain your blood pressure, blood volume, right? We learned about that. Also can help you maintain your calcium balance and how you're able to respond to the environment around you. Okay. So Again, we just talked about the pheromones. Okay. So that's basically endocrine system. Okay. So what I would like for you to talk about are other endocrine glands and the hormones that are secreted by those other endocrine